The scariest things I've witnessed are not the rustling of branches outside my window, nor the faint whispers that slither into my dreams. They're far beyond that mundane terror. Looking back, I realize now that it began with a seemingly harmless neighborhood watch meeting, a gathering designed to foster vigilance among us, your average suburbanites. In the flickering glow of the overhead lights, I'd seen Mrs. Henderson, her hair a wild shock of gray and her eyes more vacant than a mannequin's. She was the first to speak when the moderator called for concern. Some people have been disappearing. She said, her voice trembling as if she were reciting poetry in a graveyard. And not just any people, children. An uneasy murmur rippled through the room. I glanced at my neighbor, Mr. Smith, who cleared his throat with an air of skepticism. But Mrs. Henderson continued, her words spilling out in a torrent. Last week, my grandson, little Tommy, went missing for 3 days. 3 days. Her fingers curled into fists, knuckles whitening. When he came back, he was different. He won't talk about where he was. He stares into the distance like he's seeing something we can't. That night sleep eluded me as shadows danced across my bedroom walls. The wind howled, punctuating the silence with ominous sighs. I tried to dismiss Mrs. Henderson's fears as delusion, but beneath the surface of my bravado, an icy tendril of dread began to wrap around my spine. Days passed and whispers echoed through the neighborhood. A more child wren vanished. Markia, the shy boy who lived down the street, Emily, the bright girl known for her fierce laugh. Each return brought a hollow shell of their former selves. In hushed tones, the adults speculated, and many dismissed it as a prank or a wild imagination. But I had seen what was happening outside at dusk. I caught sight of them. The children gathered near the old oak tree at the edge of our suburban sprawl. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, reflecting the moon's sickly pallor, their laughter dancing on the air like a mocking echo. It was a sound woven with delight, but underlined with despair. When they glimpsed me standing at my window, their grins widened, revealing teeth that looked too sharp, too white against the dark. It wasn't long before I, too, was drawn into the murky waters of obsession. Night after night, I watched them, pulling the curtains aside just a fraction to peer into their world. Each night they gathered closer to the tree, their numbers swelling like a grotesque feast. And each night a new child vanished. Driven by need, I ventured outside one evening, heart racing, adrenaline seeping into my bones. I wanted to understand what these children were up to, what horrors lay behind those twisted smiles. The moment my feet touched the damp grass, they turned as if sensing my presence. Come and play. A chime, voices harmonizing in a chilling melody. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged as I stumbled backward. The sight that awaited me froze my blood. From the gnarled roots of the oak tree a figure emerged. Not a child, but something more monstrous, cloaked in shadows, arms swathed in darkness. Join us, it hissed, voice slithering like smoke. We are free here. You want to be free, don't you? My instincts screamed for me to run, yet part of me ached with a longing I could hardly comprehend. It was then I understood. The children were not truly lost. They had embraced something darker, something primal. They weren't simply hiding from the world. They had become vessels for a terrifying force. Tommy, I murmured, feeling a pang of sorrow ripple through me. He gazed back at me, his eyes void of any recognition. What have you become? The figure chuckled, a sound that vibrated within me, shattering all rational thought. They are mine now. They taste the freedom of night, and you cannot take them back. Panic surged through me, but my legs felt heavy as if shackled to the earth. The children moved closer, their laughter crescendoing into a cacophony of chaos. I was surrounded, engulfed in their frigid embrace. Desperation clawed at my throat, but anger flared within me. I couldn't let this darkness swallow them whole. In that moment, I lunged forward, reaching for Tommy, grasping at the fleeting remnants of the boy I had once known. As my fingers brushed his skin, a jolt of energy coursed through me, igniting dormant memories. Games in the sun, joyous laughter resonating in the air. I pulled him toward me, instinctively drawing him back from the clutches of whatever malevolence held him imprisoned. But the figure's laughter grew furious, tearing through the night like a banshee's wail. You think you can save them? Embrace the night, surrender. I fought against the weight of that darkness, pulling Tommy with me, feeling the threads of connection weave stronger as I awakened his spirit with memories we shared. With every ounce of love I could muster, I shouted, remember who you are. Remember us. For an agonizing moment, silence enveloped us. The haunting echo of the figure's laughter faltered, and in that pause, I felt the ground tremble as if the world were at war with itself. Then slowly the light began to return to Tommy's eyes, flickering like a dying flame reborn. The radiance flooded around us, washing over the encroaching shadows, pushing back against the dark. With a sudden fury, the children's faces contorted, their joy morphing into panic. One by one they receded, retreating into the depths of the looming tree led by the sinister figure who shrieked and writhed against the truth of our bond. Finally I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as the last remnants of their laughter faded into the haunting stillness of night. Tommy stood bewildered, confusion clouding his features like a fog. My heart swelled with relief and heartbreak. He was back, but for how long? The days that followed felt surreal. The children were home, but forever changed. They wondered, eyes occasionally glazing over, haunted by echoes of what they had experienced. Whispers trailed behind them like ghosts. Those who had returned never spoke of the darkness nor acknowledged the memories they had shared with the entity lurking at the edge of our world, and yet in the periphery of my mind I had seen the truth. I had witnessed the scariest thing of all, the fragility of hope, the thin veil between light and dark, and how easily it could be shattered. As the streets filled with laughter again, I kept my distance, waiting for the day when their smiles would finally reach their eyes once more. "Okay, time for bed," I said to my little brother Max. "Good night," Max replied. I closed the door to his room and walked down the hallway to my own room. I lay down in my bed, pondering some of those thoughts that come to you when you're alone. Suddenly I received a notification from my phone. It was a message from Jake, my friend from high school, saying, bro, trying to get a drink? I typed back, yeah, sure. I decided to sneak out of my bedroom window, hoping not to wake Mom and Dad. As I walked down the sidewalk, I glanced at my phone. The darkness surrounding the street lamps gave me the chills, but I tried to ignore it. I arrived at the address that Jake sent me over text. Dame Pops was right. I'm just wandering around like a lost dog, I muttered to myself. What do I even want to do with my life when my parents kick me out of the house? I sighed, feeling overwhelmed by my uncertainty. The heavy thoughts quickly slipped away as Jake approached me, a marshmallow on a stick in hand. The address he shared led me to a forest clearing where a campfire crackled amid a gathering of unfamiliar faces. The warm glow of the fire contrasted the cool night air, and I could smell the faint scent of smoke and roasting food. "Who are these people, Jake?" I asked, glancing around at the group. "Oh, just my friends," he replied casually. Okay, I said, trying to mask my unease. "Enjoy yourself here, man." With that, Jake strutted off toward a large tent, followed by 5 men and 5 women. A knot tightened in my stomach when I noticed that one of those men was Diddy. My mind raced with questions. What was he doing here? Is this even a safe place? As they disappeared into the tent, I took a seat on one of the logs surrounding the campfire. The flames danced, painting shadows on the faces of the strangers nearby. "Hey," I heard someone call from my right. Yeah, the guy continued, a friendly grin spreading across his face. "New here?" "Yeah," I replied, a bit unsure. "I came with Jake. I'm just, exploring, I guess." "I'm Alex," he said, extending a hand. "We're just hanging out. It's a chill vibe here. You should try some of the s'mores. They're amazing." I nodded, appreciating his warm demeanor. As I shook his hand, I felt myself starting to relax a little. Maybe this place wasn't so bad after all. I glanced around at the small group that had formed near the fire. Laughter erupted as someone told a joke, and I couldn't help but smile. "Is this a regular thing for you guys?" I asked Alex, hoping to learn more about the gathering. "Yeah, we do this a lot, especially on weekends," he replied. "It's a great way to unwind. You're welcome to join us." Just then, another person, a girl with bright purple hair, approached with a plate of gooey s'mores. "Here, try this. It's like a campfire tradition," she said. I took one, grateful for the welcoming atmosphere. "Thanks, I'm not really used to this kind of thing," I admitted, taking my first bite. Just relax. We're all friends here. It's all about having fun and making memories. So what do you want to do with your life?" Alex asked, leaning back and looking genuinely interested. That question hung in the air as I thought about my uncertain future. Maybe for tonight I could set aside my worries and simply enjoy the moment. "It's okay," Alex said. "We all here are not sure either." The girl who handed me the plate of gooey s'mores gave me a beer. "You sure?" Well, I quickly wished I hadn't said that. Yes, so she replied. I chugged the whole thing down my throat. Pause. As the warm liquid slid down my throat. Pause again. An unexpected chill filled the air, sending a shiver down my spine. The laughter and chatter around us faded. When darkness came, I woke up still feeling dizzy. I looked around at people in white cloaks. It could have been 8 or 12. I hadn't fully awakened when a boy was thrown into the fire, the same as the campfire, and one of the people in cloaks jumped into the fire. The person who jumped in began hugging the boy, moving his hands around him like 2 people together in a room. The flames roared unnaturally, but neither the boy nor the cloaked figure screamed. Instead, their shadows on the ground twisted and writhed in ways their bodies did not. As though something else was moving in their place, I tried to scream, but my throat was dry and all I could manage was a croak. A cloaked figures turned toward me in perfect unison. Though I couldn't see their faces beneath their hoods, I could feel their gaze, cold and heavy, pinning me where I sat. The dizziness returned, worse now, like something was crawling inside my head. Whatever was in that beer hit me hard. One of the cloaked figures said, "Wait, he's not the one. He doesn't have a birthmark. Send him home." With that, they drove me back, pushing me out of the car. I crawled to my parents' door and rang the doorbell. You can probably guess their reaction when they saw their son, half drunk and dazed, sitting on the porch in the rain. The town has changed since that night, or maybe it's always been this way and I'm just seeing the cracks in its perfect facade. People stare at me now. In the supermarket, at school, even at home, they stare a second too long, then look away with that same soft smile like they're in on some joke I can't understand. Jake, I never saw him again. It's as if he never existed. I ask people about him, but they only give me confused looks as if I'm speaking another language. Jake who? They ask, and then they smile. Then one night, as I read my little brother Max a bedtime story, he looked up at me, his wide eyes eerily calm. "Can I see your neck?" he asked, his voice innocent. What I blinked, caught off guard. "I just want to see." Pleased and exhausted, I tilted my head to the side. He leaned closer, his little fingers brushing my skin. Then he whispered under his breath, "He doesn't have the mark." I froze. "What did you say, Max?" I asked, my voice hoarse. But he just smiled, that wide, unnatural smile. "I'm leaving next week. Canada. That's where I'm going, somewhere far from this cursed place." But every night, as I pack my things, I hear footsteps in the hallway. When I check, there's no one there. I don't know if I'll ever be free of this. I don't know if leaving will save me, but I have to try.